Three undefeated teams remain in college basketball, but they all face ranked opponents this weekend to open up SEC play. Who is going to survive unscathed?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoops show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Folks, I want to thank you all for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day here in the first week of 2025. Also want to mention that you can listen to this show ad-free on Amazon Music, and give another special shout out to our everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, folks, we are recording before the 5 games on Thursday's slate in the Big Ten, so we're not going to have the results for those games for you on today's show. We're also not going to have Memphis FAU. If anything crazy happens in those games, Leaf Tulane will get them on our new Saturday evening show that is debuting this week. Very excited about that. Going to be a lot of fun. Locked On College Basketball Game Night. So check that out on Saturday evening after all the action is over. For today, though, big preview here. The SEC is starting conference play. We're going to talk about that and the 3 undefeated teams. We also got some fun games in the Big Ten, in the Big East, in the Big 12. Not as many fun games in the ACC, but we'll talk about that as well to close out the show. But Isaac, the main story here, the main excitement for this weekend is the start of conference play for the SEC, and most notably the fact that there are only 3 remaining undefeated teams in all of college basketball. They all happen to play in the SEC, and they all happen to be playing ranked teams this week. That is the story of the SEC this season. It is a gauntlet, and it is just getting underway. We have Florida, the 6th ranked team, going on the road to take on Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. That game is at 11 a.m. Eastern time on ESPN. FanDuel favors the Cats right now by 1.5, but KenPom favors the Gators. That should be a blast. We also got 23rd ranked Arkansas, John Calipari's club, going on the road to take on the number 1 ranked and undefeated Tennessee Volunteers at 1 p.m. on ESPN. So it's going to be a great day to have ESPN rolling all day long. KenPom currently favors the Vols by 12. And then Oklahoma, number 12 Sooners, also undefeated, going on the road to take on Alabama, the 5th ranked Crimson Tide, 6 p.m. on the SEC network. Guessing that's not where they would have wanted that game had they known that these would both be top 15 teams, but that's how it goes. KenPom favors Bama by 9. We'll get to the rest of the SEC slate a little bit later, but these are the 3 big games, 3 undefeated teams, 2 of them going on the road, one of them taking on a very dangerous Arkansas club, although they will be at home. What is your thought on whether we're going to still have 3 undefeated teams on Sunday? Or are we going to have 2, 1, or by some miracle, are we going to be done with undefeated college basketball teams on January 5th? Isaac, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are I can't wait to find out. And first off, I know you said the schedule makers are wishing that game wasn't on SEC Network. I'm just glad none of them overlap each other. Andy,
yeah, that's a good point.
All spread out throughout things there. What the Kentucky Florida game is first. What time is that? That's at 11 a.m. And then the Arkansas Tennessee game follows it at 1 p.m. both on ESPN. I don't even have to change the TV station. And then Oklahoma, Bama wrapping things up. Andy, and as we look at this, it's 3 undefeated teams, but the other 3 teams are playing only have 2 losses themselves each. And when I think about it, I do not think all 3 teams will still be undefeated, although that would be rad. I think in order of probability, I think Oklahoma is the most likely to lose, both because I think they're it's either they or Arkansas are the worst of these 6 teams, if I can even call it worst.
Right.
But also Oklahoma on the road at Bama, I think is a very difficult ask. But Arkansas on the road at Tennessee is a difficult ask. I think Florida has the best chance of the 3 to stay undefeated. Man, Bama, Arkansas at Tennessee, Oklahoma at Bama are both tough asks. I think Arkansas is enough better than Oklahoma that I think it's going to be. I have it Florida the most likely to stay undefeated, then Arkansas, then Oklahoma in chronological order of how the games are played. How about that? So
Tennessee's the undefeated team, so they got it. They're the ones.
Gosh, I'm an idiot. Yeah, I'm looking backwards here. So look, then it's easy for me. Oklahoma is good grief, you guys. I'm looking at stuff and it's all wackadoodle. Oklahoma is the team that's going to lose. Give me the undefeated teams being only Florida and Tennessee left when this weekend's over. But I think that would be the unexpected one then maybe is Florida going 2-0 and winning.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Tennessee wins either. Like I think Arkansas is a team that they're struggling on the defensive end. Shocker. John Calipari is their head coach. And we know with Tennessee, they're a phenomenal defensive team. And I'm betting more on Tennessee's defense to slow down Arkansas than Arkansas's defense to slow down Tennessee. But I also wouldn't be shocked if Arkansas goes in there, if Boogie Fland has a monster game, if Adu Thiero continues to play like an All-American candidate. I don't think that one's a foregone conclusion by any stretch. But yes, I do think the most likely loss here in terms of the three undefeated teams is going to be Oklahoma. It's not only – I don't think they're dramatically worse than Alabama necessarily. I don't love the matchup for them. I think it's just a difficult matchup stylistically for this Sooners team. I think there is a little bit of baked-in bias from last year where Oklahoma was great in the non-conference. They obviously were in a different conference in the Big 12, but they struggled in conference play to the point where they didn't even make the NCAA tournament. This year they come out, they play a tough non-conference schedule. I mean, this team's not only undefeated, but they have played some very good teams and beat some very good teams this year. Whereas last year it was like, it wasn't quite as confident in the team going into conference play. But having said that, for Oklahoma, if they lose this game, it's not necessarily here we go again. Like, is this team already on the bubble? Like, I think this team's in really good shape. I think Jeremiah Fears is a complete and total stud and is playing like it. And I think it's going to be really fun to see how he plays against Mark Sears, how he plays against LeBaron Phelan and the rest of this phenomenal backcourt for Alabama. But yeah, I do think ultimately Bama, especially being at home, they get the W here. I think Tennessee gets the W, although I think that game is, again, less certain than maybe a lot of folks think it will be. And then that last game, wow. I mean, there's a reason that FanDuel and Ken Palmer are not on the same page here, because this game could really literally be a coin flip between these two teams. Last year, they played some epic games that these two teams did. Obviously, this Kentucky team is brand new roster, new players, new coach, but I think that's going to be a phenomenal game. I think I'm leaning Kentucky winning that one, so I actually think that we're going to be left with just one undefeated team on Sunday, that being the number one ranked team in the country in Tennessee. But trust me when I say I wouldn't be surprised if Florida wins either.
Yeah, look, folks, it's going to be fun regardless of what happens. 3 great games in the SEC, and Andy, it's nuts because despite those 3 games being the highlighted ones, this conference, nobody has more than 3 losses, and literally all 16 teams have double-digit wins. And South Carolina is the only team with 3 losses. Everyone else has 2 or fewer. It's absolutely crazy. Andy, the rest of the SEC slate, the game that intrigues me most is that the schedule makers sent Texas to Texas A&M for their first ever SEC game, number 13th ranked Aggies. I find that hilarious, and I want to just give a little clap of the hand to the SEC schedule makers. That game, 4:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to see how that game shakes out. A couple other games that aren't as interesting. Mizzou at Auburn. We'll see what happens there. Mizzou's been kind of fun to watch this year, but Auburn is Auburn. Yeah, as a freight train at this point. Georgia at Ole Miss, South Carolina at Mississippi State, Vandy at LSU, the rest of the games here. And what should be a fun, very fun first weekend for the SEC. But certainly those 3 games featuring the undefeated teams is where most of the attention is going to be on Saturday, justifiably so.
Yeah, going to be a great slate. And, congrats to Arkansas for me making them undefeated again, as we talked about that. Andy, as we start to switch our attention to Big 12 play, Baylor is going on the road at Iowa State this weekend. We're going to find out early if the Cyclones are serious about being ready to challenge for the Big 12 regular season title. We'll talk about that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, y'all, the NFL playoffs are here or almost here, as Andy said, man. Just 1 week left of the regular season, but it's not too late to get in on that regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers, you can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And I love it because FanDuel has a ton of ways for you to pick up a W as you look at this games, whether it's lines, over-unders, prop bets, whatever it is. And while we don't really have any lines out yet for college basketball slate on Saturday, as we just talked about, we do have the Florida-Kentucky line out for Saturday pre-noons tip there at Rupp Arena. Mark Pope and the Wildcats. I almost said Mark Cat and the Wild Popes are 1.5 point favorites. Man, going to be really interesting to see if they can hold off the Florida Gators there at home. If you want to get in on that action or anything else, go check it out at FanDuel.com, where, again, you have the chance to win $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Andy, the past several years, the Big 12 has been the best conference in basketball. Right now at KenPom, they're sitting third behind both the SEC and the Big 10. But, man, this conference is still loaded, folks. Do not miss that. We want to get you ready for the Big 12 action this weekend and the Big East as well. Big 12, all 16 teams playing this weekend, 14 of which are on Saturday. And then we get number 7, Kansas, going to UCF, trying to get back where they need to be after that loss earlier in the week to West Virginia. That'll be Sunday at 4 p.m. on ESPN+. Still trying to get used to all that and all these games on CBS Sports Network. Andy, clearly the highlight game of the Big 12 slate this weekend is Saturday, number 25 Baylor at number 3 Iowa State, 2 p.m. on CBS. That'll be, I think, the second tip on CBS. I think we've got North Carolina at Notre Dame is the first tip on CBS on Saturday, and then we get to this one. My friend, I am very excited about this game. We're coming off a great Baylor performance where Norchad Omier had a double-double. VJ Edgecombe led the Bears in scoring, but Iowa State's off and rolling as well. What do you see happening in this game in Ames?
Yeah, it's a matchup between two of the teams that we expected to be in the top 5 for the Big 12, and one of them is, frankly, out of the 5 teams that everybody had consensus top 10 teams coming into the season, only one of them has performed at expectation. 4 of these 5 teams have not delivered as expected. Baylor being among them. They are still ranked. They are ranked. They fell out of the rankings, are now back in the top 25. Arizona no longer ranked at this point. Houston hasn't really had a bad season, but they didn't win as many of those marquee games as I think people expected them to. Kansas, obviously, we just talked about them with that loss to West Virginia. So the Cyclones are the team that has kind of defied those odds and continued to be in that conversation. They're a top 5 team. They've been a top 5 team basically the entire season. And as you said, are they for real? Are they serious about being a not just, oh, they're going to be one of those top 5 teams? They want to be the best. And right now, according to the standings, according to the rankings, they are the best. And you have to win at home. In the Big 12, you have to win at home. You got to win a good chunk of your games on the road to be in that conversation. So now Iowa State, they're at home. They're in Ames. They got a chance to knock off a very, very good Baylor team that is starting to find their way. They really struggled early in the year. They got waxed by Gonzaga in that first game. And then they had some struggles kind of outside of that. They had that epic game against St. John's and have kind of just been floating through. They had some injury issues. That has been part of the issue for them. But this Cyclones team is just stout. Joshua Jefferson is playing exactly like they wanted him to play when they recruited him in the transfer portal out of St. Mary's. They've gotten some strong performances from some of their other new bigs as well, Deshaun Jackson, Brandon Chatfield from Seattle U. And then that returning backcourt that was just such a dominant force last year. Curtis Jones has been one of the best, if not the best, 6th man in the entire country this season. Tamin Lipsey continues to be outstanding, like Keyshawn Gilbert. This is a very, very well-rounded, disciplined, strong team on both sides of the basketball. And I have a hard time seeing Baylor. I'm just not sure they have the horses to go into Ames and win this game. They have a ton of talent, but they've struggled in the front court. Norchad Omier, fantastic player. The rest of the depth in that front court is just not really there for the Bears. And meanwhile, Iowa State, Chatfield had, I think, 7 offensive rebounds in their most recent game. Like they have a ton of size. They gobble up rebounds. I think that's going to be the key in this game. And I think Iowa State at home does enough to win this game and continue to prove that they are not just one of the best teams in the Big 12, but they are the team to beat in this conference.
Andy, that gross sound you heard was me gobbling up rebounds into the microphone. Yeah, look, Iowa State literally one loss this season by 2 points to Auburn at the Maui Invitational. And that was a game, folks. Let's remember, they were smoking the Tigers at one point in that game. If they had held on to that, they're literally unscathed right now at 12. I mean, Iowa State is for real. I just looked at FanDuel while you were talking, Andy. Interestingly, Houston is still the favorite to win the Big 12 at Ken Pom plus 120, but then it's Iowa State plus 175 and literally falls off a cliff. After that, Kansas is next at plus 750. So the odds makers are seeing what you and I are seeing as well. And it's the same thing. You know, you talked about Baylor getting waxed by Gonzaga to start the season. Their only other loss, they've got 3 losses, but it's Tennessee and UConn. And that UConn loss looks better and better by the second, right? And so I'm with you, though. This is a big matchup on paper. I think Iowa State should be able to, depending on your definition of comfortably win this basketball game. Andy, elsewhere in the Big 12, the one that I think is most intriguing to us is Arizona at number 16 Cincinnati, 2:30 p.m. on ESPN2. As you said, Arizona now no longer ranked. They had a great, phenomenal performance from Caleb Love earlier this week. Can he be consistent version of Caleb Love, or will we get the
Is there a consistent version of Caleb Love?
That's right.
I've never seen
fair point. And then Cincinnati's coming off, had just had that loss.
Kansas State,
Kansas State in Manhattan earlier this week, but a very almost came back and won 70-67. They are favored at home at Ken Pom by 4 points in this game over Arizona. And I feel like I do not have a good read. I feel like I have a better read on who Arizona is because of who they're not, if that makes sense. But I feel like I don't have a good grasp on Cincinnati quite yet. And maybe some of that is Dan Skilling's really just kind of still coming back in to the team here.
Yeah, I think it's partly that. I think it's partly the schedule for Cincinnati and for a handful of Big 12 teams. I mean, we've talked about it before. Didn't play as many competitive games. Cincinnati has played well in some of their competitive games. They've played not so well in some of their games, so it's been a little bit harder to tell. I feel somewhat similarly about Texas Tech, who is playing at Utah, so they should win that game. If they don't, we'll certainly have more information about them. But I did want to point out
the UCF, man, that was crazy.
Yeah, that was, I want to point out something you mentioned about the SEC and saying, at least the 3 best games in the SEC aren't at the same time. That is not the case in the Big 12 here. Baylor at Iowa State's at 2 p.m. Eastern time on CBS. Arizona at Cincinnati's at 2:30 on ESPN2. And then BYU at Houston, which I would argue is the 3rd best game for this conference, is also at 2 p.m. on ESPN+. So if you want to watch some Big 12 basketball, you got to be prepared. 2 p.m. on Saturday, and you got to have as many different screens as you possibly can to watch all these games. It's a bit unfortunate, but those should all 3 be really good games. I know you talked on the other 2, so I'll mention with BYU at Houston. You mentioned Houston being still the favorite from Ken Pom. Obviously, Ken Pom's data has always really loved this Houston team. I like this game because BYU has enough playmaking and enough innovation offensively to potentially disrupt this Houston team. I could see it. Igor Demine is a matchup problem for Houston. He's a matchup problem for most teams because he's a 6'8" guard who can handle the basketball the way that he can. So I'm very interested to see that. Houston's tough. They're physical. They have a lot of size and rebounding skill. I think ultimately Houston wins, especially at home, but I certainly have my eyes very closely on that game because I think this BYU team, I don't think they're as talented as Houston necessarily, but I think that they are a tough matchup for Houston. And I think this is a good game for Kevin Young to really kind of flex his coaching muscles a little bit and potentially kind of prove how capable he is at the college level if he can pull off a win here.
Andy, very quickly, we've got the Big East action kind of spread Friday through Sunday. Everyone's in action this weekend except for Seton Hall. The big matchup is Creighton at number 8 Marquette. That's tonight, baby. Friday, 9 p.m. on FS1. FanDuel has it Marquette minus 8.5. Andy, look, on paper, I feel like, I'm right about where FanDuel would be with that. I feel like this should be a nearly double-digit win for Marquette, which is kind of crazy thinking about the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Creighton, I feel like they've been trending back in a more positive direction. Yeah. I do not see them going in to Marquette and winning this game.
Yeah, Creighton's just a really inconsistent team. They've had some great games. They've had some real stinkers. They don't have Pop Isaacs. continued to express concern about Marquette's ability to rebound, and they have continually proven me wrong by either out-rebounding teams that I did not expect them to out-rebound or winning games even when they're getting out-rebounded. So I'm done discrediting Marquette based on their rebounding, even though looking at this matchup and looking at Ryan Kalkbrenner, I would think that that's a potential advantage for Creighton in this game. But I like Marquette in this one. I like them at home. I like them to win. I like them to win by more than that 8.5-point spread. I just think this Creighton team doesn't have the horses outside of Kalk and Ashworth, who I think he had 10 turnovers in one of their most recent games. He's turned the ball over too much. He's a great guard. He's a great scorer. He's not a great facilitator. Without Pop Isaacs, without enough depth, I think Marquette wins this game. I think it'll still be a fun game, but yeah, I agree. It doesn't carry quite as much of the oomph that it's carried in the past with Creighton not playing at the level they've are accustomed to.
Yes. By the way, you're right about Stephen Ashworth, although that wasn't a win over St. John's back on New Year's Eve, 57-56. But yeah, I mean, if he's doing that against Shaka Smart, that 10 is actually like 15 turnovers against the Golden Eagles. So we'll see what happens.
Well, Michigan State heads to Columbus to take on an Ohio State team coming off 3 straight 20-plus point victories, including one of them against the Kentucky Wildcats. Can Ohio State knock off the Spartans? We're going to talk about that, some more action in the Big Ten and the ACC, all that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize that I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's kind of like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 per year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, folks, closing out the show, continuing to preview an epic slate of games this weekend. Again, as we're recording right now, there are still 5 Thursday night Big Ten games to take place. You will know the results of that game by the time you're listening to this. So we'll start with Friday. We got 2 games in the Big Ten on Friday. Iowa going on the road at Wisconsin, 7 p.m. on FS1. FanDuel favoring the Badgers in that one by 5.5. And then the big game, our favorite game of the Big Ten slate this weekend, the 18th ranked Spartans of Michigan State going on the road to Columbus to take on Ohio State, 8 p.m. on Fox. FanDuel has the Buckeyes in that one by 1.5. I'll give you the 2 other games on Saturday, and then Isaac, let's talk about this slate here. Saturday, you got 15th ranked UCLA at Nebraska, 2 p.m. on Fox, and then Michigan going on the road at USC at 8 p.m. also on Fox. 4 fun games there, Friday and Saturday in the Big Ten. What are you looking at with these contests here?
Yeah, I mean, Andy, that Michigan State and Ohio State game, I think Ohio State getting this one at home is big, that being in Columbus. Let's remember a couple Saturdays ago, that massive win over Kentucky in the CBS Sports Classic up at Madison Square Garden. Not even close. That was a 20-point win for Ohio State. Never really in doubt. Since then, the only other game they've played is Indiana State, handled them by 20 as well. And so really, Andy, it's a question of, can they sustain the good momentum they got in that win over Kentucky, man? Because that's the kind of thing that if you can find whatever that juju was and allow that to keep propelling you, that's in great shape. Let's remember they've got Aaron Bradshaw back now. Bruce Thornton, man, has been playing phenomenal basketball. I think he is key to Ohio State getting this win over Michigan State. But Michigan State just continues to do well as well. They're climbing in the rankings. They're up to, I think, 18th. In the AP now. They're on a 6-game winning streak. Going that started after that loss to Memphis in the Maui Invitational. They haven't lost since that Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. And so really interested to see Michigan State 2-0 in the Big Ten. How can the Fighting Izzos handle things going to Columbus?
I'm also really interested in this UCLA at Nebraska game. For starters, I think one of the interesting elements of the Big Ten this year, it's also to a lesser extent in the ACC, although Stanford and Cal aren't really expected to be super competitive in the ACC. But you got UCLA going halfway across the country to go play at Nebraska on Saturday. This UCLA team is very good. Mick Cronin's got a much improved roster from last year. They seem to be kind of finding themselves and putting the pieces together. But this Nebraska team has played really well as well. Bryce Williams has been fantastic. Like, this is a dangerous team. And so I'm really interested to see if UCLA, like, if they don't bring their A game to Nebraska, that could be a game where they trip up here and lose. So that'll be interesting. Also want to mention Berke Bayat-Tunsil, who transferred from UCLA to Nebraska. So it's a little bit of a game for him where he might have a little extra juice for Nebraska. He's been a starter for them and certainly going to want to go out there and play well against his former team.
Man, yes. Andy, something also I want to remind everyone of is now with the crazy geography of the Big Ten, starting from right now, there is at least one Big Ten game every day, back yesterday, Thursday, all the way through. The next time there is not a Big Ten game is Monday, February 3rd. So literally over a month straight of every day, at least one Big Ten game. That's crazy, crazy stuff there. But, obviously, again, as we don't know Thursday night's results, I'm really curious about Indiana going to Penn State. I know Indiana was hosting Rutgers on Thursday night. That is also not a crazy, easy game for Indiana. Dylan Harper had that triple-double earlier in the week. I mean, this dude is doing stuff. But, man, lots of interesting stuff. I just love the way the Big Ten is handling the scheduling to make sure we see Big Ten games on our screens all the time. There are going to be upsets here, folks. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 between Thursday through Sunday. There are 5 Big Ten ranked teams on the road. They will not all win, especially because one of them was last night, Illinois at number 9, Oregon. We'll see what happens there. But I'm so excited for how this Big Ten slate lays out.
Next up is the ACC, and folks, it's just not a super exciting slate in the ACC this weekend. You got the only ranked team in the conference right now is Duke, the 4th-ranked Blue Devils. They're going on the road at SMU. I have to imagine that Duke was not thrilled that the schedule bared out where they have to go play in Dallas as a road game. But hey, such is life when you start adding teams all over the country geographically. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Obviously, Duke is the far more talented team than SMU, but anytime you got to travel halfway across the country, it could present some intrigue for the Blue Devils in that one. Other than that, just not a lot of great games. North Carolina at Notre Dame. You got NC State at Wake Forest. The 2 teams that fancy themselves being on the bubble. We'll see if that ends up happening. You got the return of the games that happened earlier this week where Cal played Pitt and Stanford played Clemson. Now you have the reverse of that. Stanford goes on the road at Pitt. Cal goes on the road to take on Clemson. You got Louisville at Virginia. I guess that could be an interesting game. It's just not a super exciting slate for the ACC, a product of, frankly, there not being as many exciting teams as the conference as they certainly would have hoped that there was. Isaac, is there any game here that I didn't mention or that maybe interests you perhaps a little bit more than it interests me?
Yeah, I think the Louisville at Virginia game does interest me, Andy, and here's why. Louisville just had that win over North Carolina on Wednesday night. I'm curious to see how they can follow that up going on the road, and also because Virginia had just beaten NC State earlier in the week at home, coming down from 10 at halftime. So that game actually is pretty intriguing to me to see how Pat Kelsey's team can really hit the ground running here. But I think honestly, the most intriguing game to me that we haven't mentioned yet is not in the ACC. It's San Diego State at Boise State tomorrow, Andy. So I got to move out of the ACC to get to the next most intriguing game for me in the Mountain West Conference. Tonight, we've got Nevada at New Mexico. I am intrigued by that. 11 p.m. Eastern, get your naps in on FS1. FanDuel has Lobos -5.5. But, man, San Diego State at Boise State, 4 p.m. on CBS. That'll be that third game, a nice slate of games on CBS tomorrow. Andy, San Diego State had lost earlier in the week. Boise State is a strong team. It could be a 2-loss week for the Aztecs as they start trying to see if they can win this thing. If not, man, it's going to put Utah State even more in the driver's seat than they're already appearing to be.
Yeah, it's funny. There's only 5 power conferences in college basketball now, but San Diego State and Boise State, they're in the Mountain West right now, but in a few years, that'll be a Pac-12 game, so that'll count back in the power conference, depending. I suppose not everybody will count the new Pac-12 as a power conference, but I certainly am. And I'm not biased at all as a Gonzaga person. So, but that should be a really fun game. Boise State is a tough place to play. Leon Rice's team is always good. They've played phenomenally in the month of January. I think that they are going to win that game. I think San Diego State is great, but I do trust this Boise State team. They're a veteran team. They've played some good ball as of late. I think that they're going to take that one. And we'll mention that as being the only future Pac-12 matchup, because I don't think we're as excited about Fresno State at Utah State, although that is a future Pac-12 matchup. But the Aggies, they should handle that one. Fresno State, not a particularly good team. Utah State is rolling right now. But for those interested, that game will be on Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern time as well.
Oh, man, it's going to be a crazy weekend of games, you guys. Don't forget, this Saturday, for the very first time, Locked On College Basketball Game Night, hosted by our good buddy, Leaf Tulane. Andy will be at a game. I might hop in with him, depending on how my schedule goes, covering North Carolina stuff. And I've got a wedding I've got to perform on Saturday. So it's a full weekend, Andy. We'll see what happens. You guys, thanks so much for being here with us. If you haven't subscribed to the show on video and audio, make sure you do that so that you don't miss out Saturday night when Leaf gets things rolling. If you have not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, man, that's a great place to be to stay up to date with everything going on in our great sport. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. And until tomorrow night when Leaf leads the way, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.